Welcome to Think on KERA. I'm Krys Boyd. What lengths would you go to really understand your child? Seen from across a crowded playground, 8-year-old Rummel-Hudson communicates her penchant for wild colors and funky jewelry, her plucky stubbornness, even her quirky sense of humor. But if you wanted to chat with her about those things, her voice would come from an 84-key electronic device her family calls the big box of words. Because she was born with a rare brain disorder, Schuyler can't talk. Her dad, Rummel-Hudson, writes about the 7 years since that jarring diagnosis in the memoir Schuyler's Monster, a father's journey with his wordless daughter. Rob, welcome to Think.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us about the monster.
Well, the monster is polymicrogyria is the big technical medical use word for it. It's a rare brain disorder. It's a malformation that, in Schuyler's case, hits the parts of her brain that control her speech. Control her speech, primarily also her fine motor skills. It can affect different children differently. For Schuyler, it's primarily a speech issue. Some kids who get it, they have just maybe mild learning disabilities, and it can go all the way from that to kids who suffer from severe seizures, swallowing disorders, and it can even be fatal for some of these kids. So for Schuyler, but since it's hitting her as a speech disorder, in some ways she's sort of the luckiest of the unlucky kids. It's still pretty rare. The doctor who is probably the leading authority in polymicrogyria has, I think the last time I spoke with him, he had about 1,000 patients. So, and he's sort of the Wizard of Oz for those of us who have kids with PMG. So he probably, that number's probably about right. So it is a little bit like winning a kind of a bad lottery, but they're diagnosing more and more cases, so they're finding more of them. But it's still pretty rare.
So how is day-to-day life different for Schuyler than for what are called neurotypical kids?
Well, most of Schuyler works really hard at having a normal life. Communicating with Schuyler can be challenging. She does use a speech device. In conjunction with that, she does know some sign language. Now, unfortunately, her disorder also, since it affects her fine motor skills, it makes her sign language a little more difficult. Some of the more intricate signs that use finger motions are a little bit harder for her. And she verbalizes. She verbalizes a lot. Sometimes people will say, "It must be very quiet around your house." It is not. It is not quiet at all. Schuyler, she verbalizes. She doesn't have hard consonants, and that's what makes it so difficult to understand what she says. But her vowels, she has her vowels. She has some soft consonants like M's and N's, and her inflection is spot on. It's funny, sometimes if we're in a restaurant and a waiter will bring her something, and she'll say thank you. Well, she's not really saying thank you, but you hear thank you. You hear your mind sort of fills in the gap. So she actually communicates verbally a lot more than she used to, and communicates a lot of her needs that way. But yeah, she's a rambunctious kid. She's never sad about this. She's very rarely frustrated about it. She makes her way, and she has it since she has a kind of a variety of these communication tools, including the device. She makes herself understood.
I wanted to ask you about the frustration, because when you have a toddler, what you read says that the reason they have tantrums is because they have things that they want to say and they just don't have the skills to do that. Was she more frustrated before she had the box that allowed her to sort of open up what she was thinking to everybody else?
Yeah, I think she was. We went through, and I think all parents go through this period where the kids are kind of figuring out how to deal with each other. They go through that sort of Lord of the Flies stage where, what's the pecking order? That was a difficult stage for her, I think, like it is for most kids, where she would maybe get physical, would maybe push kids or push back when kids when she would have these little conflicts. So when she got the device and she started to have some doors started to open up for her, it was a tremendous relief, I think, in a lot of ways. And she took to it very, very quickly. I mean, she would use it to say things that she had sign language for. She had things that she could verbalize sort of clearly, like yes and no. And but when she had the device, she wanted to use the device, because I think all of us, having not had a voice for so long, all of a sudden having a way to speak and actually use words the way that everyone else did, it really it opened up a world for her. And since she's had the device, I think that frustration level has really dropped off.
People would understand that when you have a child with special needs, you have to reset some of your expectations. But I know that you feel like you have to do that sort of regardless as a parent. And parents of kids who don't have health problems just have never considered that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think that most parents have, I mean, when your child is born and you're holding this baby it's just a baby. You have no logical expectations that you can put forward. I think we all start to build that little script in our head. You look at this little baby, and in your mind you're seeing this little baby graduating from college, or this little kid is going to be, whatever your ambitions are. And one of the hardest things with Schuyler was not letting go of those ambitions, because we still have them, but letting go of the predictability of those ambitions. I mean, my hopes for Schuyler are really I think she's going to be able to do whatever she wants to do. But unlike I think a neurotypical child's parents, it's really hard to see what that future is going to be like. I mean, even if I went back 2 or 3 years from now, there's no way I would see where she is now. So I think I think there is a process. There's a process for special needs parents especially, but I think for parents of any child who turns out to have a difference, it's almost like a grieving process when you find out that your child has a disability or has a learning disorder or whatever is setting them apart. It's almost like you're grieving for the child that you had imagined and this sort of internal narrative that you had put together. And I think a lot of special needs parents feel a little bit guilty about that, about having to go through that grieving process. But I think it's a completely real and a completely normal reaction, because you're not just making a place for who your child is going to become now with these special circumstances, but you're also sort of letting go of the expectations you had, and whether or not those expectations are reasonable or not, they're there. They're there for all of us, I think.